Hello and welcome to Florida Pulse. I'm Tony Doris, editorial page editor for the Palm Beach Post. I'm here with my counterpart from the Tallahassee Democrat, Byron Dobson. We're hosting a panel discussion today on the Gannett newspaper websites on the state of discrimination in Florida. These days, we often hear the word woke used disparagingly, as if it's wrong to appreciate diversity and to be sensitive to one another's right to be accepted and treated as equals. But clearly, from the constant stream of incidents in Florida and nationwide, from bigoted statements to bullying all the way up the spectrum to violence, not enough of us are woke. So today we have three panelists to help us outline issues they've experienced and to share thoughts on possible solutions. Our guests are Josephine Gahn, Vice President of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, Wilfredo Ruiz, Florida Communications Director for the Council on Islamic American Relations, and Rose Charles, President of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority at Florida Gulf Coast University, where she's also involved in Black Student Alliance and the Multicultural and Leadership Development Center. I'd like all of you to just view this as an informal collegial conversation. Jump in where you like. Don't wait to be called on. I'll start by asking each of you to briefly describe how bad is it out there? What kinds of incidents or discrimination are your constituencies experiencing? Is it getting worse? Josephine, why don't you start?
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on this panel. I really look forward to the conversation. So from a Jewish perspective, Jews in the United States and around the world are facing a very difficult and dark time. Unfortunately, the oldest hatred is resurging. Anti-Semitism is like a virus and it never goes away, it just reemerges. It started reemerging visibly about 15 to 20 years ago in Europe and about 10 years ago in the United States. And we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of anti-Semitic attacks and murders, Pittsburgh, Poway, Muncie, to name a few. And I'll give you just a few statistics because they bear this out and I think they're important. According to the FBI, attacks on Jews accounted for 58% of all religion-based hate crimes, the highest of any targeted religious group. The Anti-Defamation League's 2020 audit shows a slight decrease from the 41-year high of 2019. This is largely due to COVID lockdown, but there has thus been an increase in online anti-Semitism, COVID-related anti-Semitism, harassment, and Zoom bombing. Florida has seen a 40% increase in anti-Semitism in 2020. And when looking at the anti-Semitism arising from the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, anti-Semitic incidences in Florida increased 115% in May 2021 over the same month the previous year. The ADL statistics also show that this year, 63% of Jews in America have experienced or witnessed some form of anti-Semitism in the last 5 years. 31% have experienced some form of online harassment, and 59% feel Jews are less safe in the United States today than they were a decade ago.
Let me cut you off quickly and ask if Wilfredo is seeing similar numbers, a similar increase on the Islamic side.
It does, and it compounds because we have our community suffers from significant levels of anti-Muslim and bias incidents and hate crimes. But also you need to compound on top of that they also receive or are victims of hate crimes because they're African Americans, they're Black, because they are dark-skinned Middle Easterns, or because they are Hispanics like me. So you have the level of the religion hate crimes that happen and hate incidents, but also we cannot leave aside that Muslims are Black, Muslims are Hispanics, Muslims are Middle Easterns, Muslims are Africans, and they also suffer that. And a third level of suffering the discrimination and the singularization for being immigrants, a good part of the Muslim community, or descendants of first, second generation of new immigrants to America.
Do world events aggravate aggravate that situation when we see immigration coming from Afghanistan or from Syria or from wherever? Do we suddenly find that it impacts on how people respond to Islamics in the United States?
Definitely, and also how our community became so prone of being used as a political football. Anytime you see elections approaching, you will see an increase in the mentioning of Muslim communities and Muslims in America, because they are targeted by the political class also of our communities. So not only in their neighborhoods, not only by the hate groups that exist and operate. As a matter of fact, in Florida, we have statistics from the Southern Poverty Law Center. The last ones, to be specific, that we have 68 active hate groups identified operating here in Florida. That include anti-Muslims, white supremacists, that as a matter of fact, this is the most or the crime with the most possibility to affect an American today, as far as an extremist crime, it has been identified by the Department of Justice and the Homeland Security, that is the white supremacists. So it is there where should be the focus on our security, but we see that the Muslims keep being referenced at and being used, I repeat, as a political football for in detriment then of what happens and translates in the schools, what translates in the job place, what translates while Muslims are traveling, where we have a government who have not corrected lists that even have toddlers in the list are being banned from traveling. So when you have these deficiencies 20 years after September 11, that mark a high increment in the hate incidents and how the Muslim community was viewed by the rest of the American neighbors, it is very worrisome, and we see things changing, but not perhaps in a level where the services that the Council on American Islamic Relations renders to victims of discrimination, for example, or immigration, have lower in any sort. On the contrary,
We'll circle back to the political aspects. I wanted to bring Rose into the conversation a little bit and ask. Well, I'd mentioned that you represent a couple of different groups, Rose: Haitian Americans, African Americans, and also you're younger than most of us on this panel today. So just curious what you've experienced on campus and among the younger groups. You know, it's funny because sometimes you expect younger people to be a little bit more woke than the adults, but let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I migrated from Haiti when I was 4 years old, and I became a citizen in 2014. So on campus, I think a lot of the discrimination is based in simply ignorance. To put it quite frankly, there is a lot of, I guess, performatism that also occurs. So, you know, like in being an ally to the Black community, like in times that we have like protests on campus, and versus like personally what you know, some individuals stand for, is like that there's a disparity there. So for example, if we have a protest kind of just like protesting some things that we don't agree with that had happened on campus, there will be individuals there that, you know, are there to kind of, I guess, save their face, because they represent like larger communities on campus. So I think a lot of like what I've experienced is just a lot of ignorance that I've heard and that has been said to me, my friends kind of during just like normal social interactions. And I think that's the main thing that is on campus that I see, and being involved in, you know, the Multicultural and Leadership Development Center and Black Student Alliance. I think what like we want to do is kind of just bring forward like that knowledge, or that kind of like just, yeah, I guess knowledge is the best way of kind of like getting rid of a lot of, not getting rid, but educating a lot of ignorance that like we've seen or heard.
Do you feel like the atmospherics are different from you because you're in Fort Myers versus Miami?
Yes. So I first came to FGCU in 2018, and I grew up in Miami basically my entire life. Like I migrated first to Miami when we came from Haiti, and it was a bit of a culture shock for me. To be quite honest, I originally heard the term PWI going to FGCU, and for a lot of Black students, like PWI is predominantly white institute. So immediately, for me, I believe 60% of FGCU is white, and only I believe 6 point something percent of FGCU is Black, and the rest, is minorities, Hispanics, Asian, and so for me, it was a bit of a culture shock because I immediately was searching for my community, and I found that within Black Student Alliance because there are a lot of incidents where you're surrounded by people who are saying very ignorant things and things that they aren't supposed to be saying, like racial slurs, and trying to justify the reason why they're saying these things. So I immediately knew, I was like, okay, no, I can't be around people who try to justify when they say, certain things, especially racial slurs. So I immediately was like, okay, where can I find my community, and then where can I make an impact so that people who are trying to justify why they're saying racial slurs or being ignorant, finding a way to educate them through programs and events that we put on.
Josephine, does the Jewish Federation engage in any kind of education programs to kind of get people, more used to meeting people who aren't like them?
Yes, we do. It's very important. It's very much a part of my job, being community relations, is connecting with other groups and other people to educate. Not only to educate about what our community is experiencing, but also to share the burden. Here we are in a panel with an African American woman, Haitian woman. I don't know if you go by African American correctly, actually.
I go by Haitian.
Haitian, exactly. So that's a whole other conversation, and someone from the Muslim Hispanic community, and we're all talking about hate that we experience. So we need to come together on this. We need to reach out to one another. And the thing is, when you start to talk in these racial lines, and you talked about the woke environment, which is increasingly race essential, it leaves out some realities, because from a Jewish perspective, we are sort of falling in nowhere land. And Wilfredo talked about Muslims being Hispanic, being Black, being Arab, being every race under the sun. And that's the same for Jews. Because most people around here may only see white European Ashkenazi Jews, it doesn't mean that's who we are exclusively. We too are Black. We too are Asian. We too are Hispanic, etc., and Middle Eastern. So and we don't always fall neatly into this category that many people want to put people into now. And I think that is really to the detriment. We need to just, start to look at each other as human beings.
I wonder if memories are fading, and that's part of the problem. I'm getting older, we're all getting older, and what seemed to me like very sharp memories of people talking or instructing me about the Holocaust, or me watching the civil rights movement on TV, or going to protests. It seems like memories of those events are not some things that younger people in our community share. So as the years go by, does the Holocaust get forgotten? Does the final result of anti-Semitism or bigotry or racism, does that get forgotten by younger generations?
There's no question. This is the tragedy. The Holocaust, the reason it's taught, and we want it to be taught, is because this is the potential end result of hate, of hatred and bigotry. It's not benign. It can lead to mass murder. And the lessons are so crucial. But it's not only that are being forgotten, certainly as survivors die out and it's not talked about, it's also being denied. And anti-Semites, this is a very favored part of what they are about, is they deny the reality of the Holocaust, even while there's still survivors and evidence. So, it's a very, very important conversation. But that too, we thought the Holocaust would be the end of anti-Semitism. Alas, it just for a while was unacceptable to express Jew hatred. That unacceptability is no more.
Okay. Wilfredo, go ahead. Sure. Oh, you're muted.
Tony, you mentioned a little earlier that historical events like the Holocaust are being forgotten. But I believe that in addition to that, we should be very honest at examining our own history. Yesterday, our kids were being taught this benign, beautiful story on how Christianity arrived to the Americas via Christopher Columbus. They're being taught, our school kids, yesterday, today, and this week, that on that version, without addressing anything of the condition, how the condition changed for Native Americans, and deeper discussions. The same when they lightly address the civil rights struggle in this country and the significance of it, how we just go around the figure, an essential figure, as a matter of fact, of Martin Luther King, and everything goes around, let's celebrate the Martin Luther King Day, without describing the struggles and the things that still need to be corrected to eliminate the institutional racism that exists today in this country. And Florida and all the southern states are excellent examples on how this permeates our education department, our law enforcement, our corporate world, still permeated with this big Confederate flag on it, and this white supremacist tone that affects the Jews, affect the African Americans, affect the Muslims, affect the Hispanics. This is a reality that perhaps have transformed our organizations. There are multiple immigrant organizations and others dealing with racial issues that we are experimenting a different relation in how they interact with us. Before it was more just to share and coincide in events. Now we are planning events together. We are meeting together on how to curb the government's intention on limiting our freedom of expression with this new laws about protesting in Florida and many other laws that hinder our freedom of expression. Some of them that some of those freedoms that cost the lives of many Americans, and as a matter of fact, some of them, like the freedom to boycott whoever we want, that Martin Luther King taught all Americans that was an exemplary way of peaceful protesting.
Let's talk about that. I have an idea where you're headed, but go ahead.
Yeah, and this is being curbed by our legislative efforts in our state that are curbing the rights of our students in every level to criticize, for example, the Israeli policies towards Palestinians, and they're running immediately to equate that to anti-Semitism. So if you want to boycott any corporation that is assisting the illegal settlements of the Israelis in the West Bank that are internationally recognized as illegal settlements, if you want to boycott one of those companies that are assisting to do that violation of civil rights and human rights freedoms, then you're immediately equated, and you'll see it flooding, organizations jumping on you, or worse, people are being denied the right to have contracts with the government because you're criticizing the state of Israel. Because now we cannot tolerate that rights that cost the lives.
So you're equating that with discrimination against Muslims. Josephine, I'd like to hear you explain where you feel you stand on that argument.
Yeah, so yes. Obviously, I have a slightly differing opinion, and I'll tell you the distinction between what I believe and I think what Wilfredo is saying is we don't object to anyone's free speech and free rights to do what they will. Here's the problem. it ties in, I talked about the statistics only about what's going on in terms of anti-Semitism. But what we're facing today, and this takes it to a whole nother level, for Jews, we are getting hatred from multiple sources at one go. And that's sort of what's distinguished anti-Semitism. It's been around, the oldest hatred, but it keeps morphing, it keeps changing. To sort of fit the times. We call it a virus that emerges in times of apparently when the world needs someone to hate. And we all know about the right-wing, white supremacist, neo-Nazi hate. We're lumped in with everybody else. Everyone else on this panel would be considered untenable to that. But we also get it from other sources. We get it from Islamist extremists, and we're getting it from the left-wing elements in our society as well, both here and in Europe. And the anti-Semitism that's dominating the left, who will deny they're anti-Semites, takes the form of hatred of the state of Israel, and it's translated into hatred of Jews. So I want to make a very clear distinction here between criticizing Israeli policy, government. It's a very difficult, complicated issue in a complicated region. But we without doubt, and I quoted the statistics from May, because May coincided with the conflict between Israel and Hamas. We saw this extraordinary increase in attacks on Jews around the world. So Jews were held responsible for a war that Israel didn't even start, first of all. Jews were attacked. They were attacked on our streets, even in Florida, because of an international conflict. So when Wilfredo talks about being victims of international issues and it's taken out on them here, whether it's events in Europe and travel bans, etc., shocking. But the same thing is happening to Jews. And there is a grave distinction. We need to understand exactly what we're talking about and what forces, when it comes to the discussion about Israel, who are we talking about? Because there are those who are criticizing because they want the best outcome and they want a two-state solution and they want peace in the Middle East and in Israel and the Palestinian people. And there are those who do not.
Are you saying that they shouldn't be able to boycott on issues that they care deeply about because it might lead? Are you saying that they shouldn't be able to boycott on issues that they care deeply about simply because some people will view that as anti-Jewish versus anti-Israel?
There's a distinction, and I think the laws that Wilfredo is talking about is when you signal take out one particular country as your target. That the definition of anti-Semitism when it comes to Israel is when you delegitimize the state, when you demonize the state of Israel, and when you hold it to a double standard. So that the only country in the world that you are going to boycott or divest or sanction is the state of Israel. That is the rub and that is the nuance.
Wilfredo, how do you respond to that?
The response is that Martin Luther King and many others have died in this country precisely to safeguard our freedom of expression. Part of our peaceful freedom of expression is to boycott whomever I want to boycott. Whomever I want to boycott, because that's a means of expression a peaceful means of expression of protesting. So if you're going to have a law exclusively protecting Israel from that and conditioning, including, and this law is not only in, and there's a series of laws. Some affect the campuses, some affect the contractors. In Texas, for example, a contracted teacher is already challenging a law that obligated her to sign a document saying she will not be the boycott, divest, or sanction Israel if she wants to get a contract with the state of Texas. That limitations to the freedom of expression that cost the lives of our Americans and African Americans brothers and sisters and Hispanics who marched shoulder to shoulder with Martin Luther King, are freedoms that under no circumstances and for no reason should be taken from us. If you take away any of the peaceful means to protest politically, what are you leaving the people with? And that is what it is essential. So
I need to
criticize Netanyahu, and I criticize the policies of the state of Israel that allows hundreds of thousands of people to settle outside the recognized frontiers of Israel, and that have been condemned by the international community and deemed illegal. I don't want anybody in my government sanctioning me because I'm protesting that.
This topic is one that we could talk about for an hour all by
itself. I have to respond to a couple of things. I'm sorry. Quickly. First of all, the laws you talk about do not impinge on your right as an individual to boycott however you want to. It's about contracts with the state, and the state has made those decisions.
And who contracts?
So that and none of them infringe on your rights
Who contracts with the state?
Well, organizations. It's organizational entities.
A teacher, like it happened in Texas, or somebody who's a printer, or somebody who does construction. And if you're going to hinder my ability to do business in America, because I'm critical of the state of Israel,
we'll let her have one short.
There are just two other things I need to say on this. I don't want to get into a back and forth on this, but Jews stood side by side with Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement as much as anyone, and more so. There's a very strong history of identity and support and lives given Jewishly as well. So let's not forget that. The point with the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, you're talking about your rights to do thus and so. Okay, we can agree to disagree. But I will tell you that the movement itself is not benign. It is not simply about your right to boycott, divest, and sanction. It is said by the founders of the movement that their goal is the elimination of the state of Israel. That is a very different goal, and it receives some very serious funding to make sure that this happens. So it's not just about your personal choice and your political opinion. It is a movement that is very powerful and has great intention of not having a Jewish state. And that needs to be said out there.
Okay, let's get back more directly on our topic
of
discrimination specifically. Byron, go ahead, please.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to shift this a little bit to Rose. Rose, thanks for being on one of our guests here. I'm here in Tallahassee, and home of Florida A&M University, which is experiencing a major resurgence by students of color who want to return or want to the HBCU experience. And at the same time, the university is in competition with the other universities in Florida to attract top students that they can. I wanted to ask you, what do you feel that PWIs, the administrators at PWIs, are they aware of the attention about discrimination on campuses, and what are they missing as far as connecting with minority students in particular, or students in general who on the campuses today?
Well, I just want to say, in all my years that I've been at FGCU, since fall 18, I've had one Black professor. So that already speaks a lot. And I think professors that I've had, I believe they are aware of the discrimination tension that is there, but I believe that some of them could be better at being educated, I believe. I think FGCU in general does a great job with diversity inclusion trainings and, those type of trainings, like with professors and everything. So for the professors that I've personally had, I know that they are aware of the discrimination tensions that are there. For other students that I know and my friends who have had other professors, they've had a completely different experience where they do believe that throughout their classes they've been discriminated against, where they were having conversation about like a social topic, and they weren't basically allowed to speak their mind, versus their white counterparts who were allowed to speak their mind because of a white professor. So although it doesn't exist in the program, well, I don't want to say it doesn't exist in the program that I'm in, although I've never experienced that with a professor, because my professors, even though only one has been Black, I do believe they are aware of the discrimination tension that's there. I do know, though, that other students who are my friends have experienced discrimination from their professors and have felt that tension. And to answer your question about just kind of PWIs and HBCUs, I think a lot of it is just, for me, originally, like, I wanted to attend an HBCU, and I don't regret my decision in coming to FGCU, because I do believe, like, you're where you're supposed to be. But I know a lot of students do share the sentiment of wanting to be at an HBCU versus a PWI, because I think for Black students on this campus and just Black students in general, sometimes we do feel that, like, just like connection of being with other Black students. So being at an HBCU, we may feel like we have a better opportunity to thrive, and just different opportunities, and of course the opportunity as well to choose an array of Black professors. And although we do have like Black staff at FGCU, of course, Black professors, it's different when it's in a completely different environment as like an HBCU. Like, I know one of my friends every day, like, I speak to him, he's like, oh, I wish I would have gone to HBCU. So it's just, differences that Black students feel, but we try to, I guess, make it like a community with, I guess, the main ways, like through NAACP on our campus, through BSA, through Black faculty and staff, professors, and everything like that.
I wanted to follow up with a question there. With you're a member of the president of the Alpha Kappa Alpha chapter, one of the Divine Nine organizations there. Yes. And I wanted to ask you, how empowered do the Black students feel at your campus about approaching the leadership, the president's office, as well as attending trustees meetings, to paint the picture of what you all are feeling, and what kind of response do you feel you would get if you did that? I guess, first of all, how empowered do you feel about addressing this on campus and having people understand this? And then what would you think would be the outcome of bringing this like publicly to the administration, including trustees?
For me personally, I've never been someone who's kind of been shy of saying how they feel. And I think through NPHC and other Black organizations on campus, I think we've done already a great job of kind of just like voicing how we do feel. I know that during the protests in the spring, there were, students who were voicing concerns and how we felt on campus. A lot of students from student government, and I believe President Martin was there as well at the protest. And so we've never been shy of kind of just voicing how we feel to Board of Trustees, President, Dean of Students, anyone. And so I think like we're definitely more empowered now that, like the Assistant Dean of Students and Dean of Students are both Black. So that is definitely like an empowering factor there. And yeah, like we've never, I don't believe that the Black community on campus has ever been shy and kind of just sharing how they feel to anyone. And we will definitely stick together and make sure that like our voices and our concerns are heard.
Thank you. We're getting close to the end on time. So what I'd like to do is ask the three of you panelists to wrap up, give yourself about a minute to discuss something that gives you hope about what you see out there on the discrimination front. Why don't we start with Wilfredo?
Briefly, I just wanted to address an issue that is going on in the Pasco County, and and it gives me hope because it enabled the community to come into a coalition to protect our youth, our students. And what has happened is the Pasco coalition formed with CARE and other civil rights organizations and civic organizations, where we are asking the Department of Education there in Pasco to stop sharing the information to the sheriff department, for the sheriff to stop using that information of our minor students to engage in some kind of criminal predictive or policing. That kind of that is not the purpose of our school records and our students' records. And we don't know if that policy of having our student records shared with any law enforcement department, for the law enforcement department to engage in some kind of criminal or possibility of leaving the school predictive policies is something that it gives me hope, because there are many areas where we can work together and that we are working together, especially to protect those that are the most needed when it comes to losing their civil liberties being affected.
Thank you. Josephine?
That's the hardest question you just asked, Tony. Actually, optimism. Absolutely, we have to have it. We've got to keep plugging at it. I had comments I would have made about what the plight of Jewish students on campuses is about, because that's pretty dire too. But we'll move to optimism is difficult. This is a 2,000-year-old hate, and clearly we haven't done so well at stopping it thus far. So all we can do is speak out, educate, talk to one another. We all have to. The fact that we're having this forum is so crucial, because it acknowledges the darker side of what's going on in our society. So that's already a start. And if we're open to talking to one another, even if we disagree, we've got to keep talking, because ultimately what starts with us and any of we minorities doesn't end with us. And at stake is our liberal democracy. So we have to really look at ourselves, look at others, and call it out, speak out against it whenever we can, regardless of your politics, your ideology, your ideological positions. We've got to speak out against hate, and we've got to stand together against it. And you've got here a panel of minorities. Certainly Jews are only 2% of the United States population. We're only 14 to 15 million people in the world. We can't do this alone. We need allies. We need people to stand up and be allies with us. So I guess the optimism comes from the hope that this conversation is happening, that we all recognize it, and we've all got to speak out against it. And hopefully, because it's not an optimistic time, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Rose, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? That's a great question. I think education and awareness. For me, I think education is the biggest thing. So just being able to educate everyone, educate and bring awareness to the issues, and kind of just being able to weed out ignorance, I think for me is my biggest hope, because through education, I've been empowered. So I would say education.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank our guests, Josephine Gahn of the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, Wilfredo Ruiz, Florida Communications Director for the Council on Islamic American Relations, and Rose Charles, President of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority at Florida Gulf Coast University. That's it for us for today. This discussion will be available for later viewing on the websites of the Palm Beach Post, Tallahassee Democrat, and other Gannett newspapers throughout Florida. Thanks for joining us. From the Palm Beach Post, I'm Tony Doris with Byron Dobson from the Tallahassee Democrat.
Thank you.